My parents said my brother and his family were moving in my house, and I had no say because he had already decided. I've always been the overlooked one in my family. Never the favorite, never the golden child, just Matthew, the accountant. My brother Ryan, on the other hand, has always been the one my parents adored. When we were kids, Ryan got brand new bikes while I ended up with his used ones. On birthdays, he'd receive high-end gaming consoles, while I got books or clothes. During high school, my parents attended every single one of Ryan's football games, but they only showed up to one of my debate competitions, the final, which for the record I won. Even then, they spent half the time talking about how proud Ryan would have been. My grandfather's was just another reminder of a lifetime of favoritism. Ryan inherited a spacious four-bedroom house in an upscale neighborhood, while I got a modest two-bedroom home on the edge of the suburbs. My mom had begged Grandpa to leave the bigger house to Ryan. I once overheard a conversation she thought I wasn't around for. "Dad, please," she pleaded. "Ryan will have a family one day. He needs more space. Matthew will be fine in the smaller house." I never complained about any of it. What would have been the point? In our family, Ryan always came first. That was just how things worked. So, I wasn't shocked when, during one of our usual family gatherings, Ryan and his wife Olivia cleared their throats dramatically and announced that they had major news. "We decided to sell the house," Ryan declared, beaming. I almost choked on my water. "We're investing in an incredible opportunity," Olivia added, practically bouncing in her chair. "Ryan's friend Eric has this amazing business venture, and we're getting in at the ground level." My parents clapped their hands in excitement. "Oh, that's wonderful," Mom exclaimed. "What kind of business venture?" I asked cautiously. "It's a bit complicated," Ryan said, waving his hand dismissively. "Eric is launching a tech platform that connects investors with startups. It's going to revolutionize the venture capital industry. We're going to make a fortune," Olivia chimed in. "Eric projects a 300% return in just the first year." 300%? I repeated, setting my fork down. "That sounds suspicious. Look, you guys have two young kids. Sophie is only 5, and Noah just turned 3. Are you sure selling your house is the best move? Maybe you should invest a portion of your savings instead?" The atmosphere in the room suddenly became tense. Olivia scoffed, and Ryan flashed me the same condescending smile I had seen my whole life. "Matthew," he said slowly, as if speaking to a child, "I know you mean well, but I studied finance at Westfield University. You're just an accountant who went to community college. I think I have a better grasp of entrepreneurship than you do." I bit my tongue. What Ryan never mentioned was that he had barely scraped by at Westfield while I graduated with honors and had already been promoted twice in 5 years at my firm. "Besides," Ryan continued, "Grandpa gave me the bigger house for a reason. He always knew I had a mind for business. This is exactly the kind of opportunity he would have wanted me to seize." I could have told him right then and there that Grandpa had only given him the bigger house because Mom had begged for it. I could have pointed out that Grandpa, who built his modest wealth through careful savings and conservative investments, would have been horrified by the idea of Ryan selling his house to invest in some vague tech startup. I could have mentioned that Eric had already gone through 3 failed startups in the past 5 years. But why bother? Ryan was a grown man. He and Olivia had made their decision, and frankly, after a lifetime of playing second fiddle, I didn't feel particularly inclined to save him from himself. "You're right," I said instead, taking another sip of water. "It's your choice." Mom beamed at Ryan. "We're so proud of you for taking this risk," she said. "It takes courage to chase an opportunity like this." Dad nodded in agreement. "Your grandfather would be proud, too." For the rest of the dinner, Ryan and Olivia talked excitedly about all the things they planned to do once they became wealthy. They'd travel the world, buy a vacation home, enroll their kids in a private school. I stayed quiet, nodding and smiling when necessary. Meanwhile, I mentally reviewed my own renovation plans for my small house. I had been upgrading it, room by room, using the money I had saved from my boring accounting job. Last month, I finished the kitchen. Next up was the bathroom. 3 months after that fateful night, I was standing under my brand new rainfall shower, enjoying the hot water, when my phone started buzzing relentlessly. At first, I ignored it, but after the 5th consecutive call, I sighed, turned off the water, and grabbed a towel. 6 missed calls from Mom. That was never a good sign. I immediately called her back, still dripping water onto my bathroom floor. "Matthew, thank God." Mom answered, her voice tense. "Can you come over? It's about Ryan." An hour later, I pulled into my parents' driveway and immediately noticed something strange. A mountain of suitcases and boxes was stacked up on the front porch. Before I could even ring the doorbell, the door swung open, and I was nearly knocked over by Sophie and Noah, who came barreling toward me. "Uncle Matthew," Sophie cried. "We're staying with Grandma and Grandpa now." I looked up to see my mother standing in the doorway, her face weary and drained. Behind her, Ryan paced back and forth, phone pressed to his ear, while Olivia sat on the couch, staring blankly at her laptop. "What's going on?" I asked, though I already had a pretty good idea. Mom motioned for me to come inside and shut the door behind us. Ryan and Olivia had to leave their apartment. She whispered, "The rent was too much." So they had already burned through the house money. After selling their home, Ryan and Olivia had immediately splurged on a flashy red Porsche 911, completely impractical for a family with 2 small children. Then they rented a luxury apartment downtown, and Ryan quit his stable job at the bank to focus entirely on his investment. They had poured around $500,000 into Eric's business venture and spent the remaining $100,000 on the car and a lavish vacation to the Maldives, leaving the kids with my parents for 3 weeks. Eric said the first quarter is always slow, Ryan said loudly, finishing his call. He forced a smile. But things are about to take off any day now. I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, and my dad followed me in. "How bad is it?" I asked quietly. Dad sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "They've burned through everything. The apartment was $4,000 a month. The car payment was another $1,500. They couldn't keep up. And the investment?" Dad's expression darkened. "Eric keeps saying they're on the verge of a breakthrough." He shook his head. "But I have a bad feeling about it." Over the next few weeks, I watched from a distance as Ryan scrambled to find a job. He eventually landed a position at a car dealership, a significant step down from his previous role in banking, but at least it was something. Meanwhile, Olivia tried to keep up appearances, posting carefully curated photos on social media to make everything look normal. But things were far from normal. My parents' modest retirement home wasn't meant to house 6 people. One evening, my mom called, sounding exhausted. "Matthew, sweetheart, I hate to ask, but..." She hesitated. "We're struggling a little with groceries. Extra mouths to feed." I knew what was coming. "How much do you need, Mom?" "Oh, anything would help," she said quickly. "We're just a little tight this month." I promised to send the money right away and settled on $600. Enough to help, but not enough to put a strain on my own budget. When I told her the amount, she thanked me profusely, though I could hear the slight disappointment in her voice. She had clearly hoped for more. The next month, I got another call. Then another. The $600 turned into a monthly transfer. I didn't mind helping, but I couldn't help but notice that despite their financial troubles, Ryan and Olivia still managed to keep the Porsche. Priorities, I guess. One evening, I attended my cousin Beth's birthday party. I thought it would be a nice break from all the family drama, but I was wrong. My Aunt Patty pulled me aside near the dessert table. "Matthew, dear," she whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "How are you holding up with all this Ryan situation?" I shrugged, just trying to help where I can. Aunt Patty leaned in closer. "Well, you should know that your parents are at their breaking point. Of course, they love Ryan, but having his entire family there is wearing them down." She took a sip of her wine and lowered her voice. "And between you and me, they have a plan to fix it." A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. "What kind of plan?" "They want Ryan and his family to move into your house." I nearly dropped my plate. "What?" "Your mom thinks it makes perfect sense since you live alone in a 2-bedroom house." I stood there, frozen, as Aunt Patty gave my arm a sympathetic squeeze. "I thought you should know. It didn't seem right for them to be planning this behind her back." The party continued around me, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was the sheer audacity of it. They weren't just planning to ask me to take in Ryan and his family. They were planning to push me out of my own home. As I drove home that night, my mind was racing. I knew exactly what was coming next. The guilt trips, the family pressure, the classic, "it's just temporary," which would somehow turn into permanent. And once Ryan and his family moved in, I'd be expected to pay the bills, clean up after them, and eventually give up my own space entirely. Not this time. I wasn't going to let them take advantage of me again. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at my kitchen table, thinking. By the time I finished the glass, I had a plan. The next morning, I walked straight into my boss Dave's office without an appointment. He looked up from his computer, surprised. "Matthew, everything okay?" I didn't bother with small talk. "Is that accounting position at the Pittsburgh branch still open?" Dave leaned back in his chair, studying me. "That's a senior position, Matthew. More responsibility. A new environment. A big move. I'm ready for it." I said it with confidence. "I've been here for 5 years. I've consistently exceeded my targets. My performance reviews are excellent. I have the qualifications." Dave nodded thoughtfully. "Well, I can't say I want to lose you here, but..." He smiled. You'd be a great fit for the position. Let me make a few calls. He paused. The position starts in 4 weeks. Is that enough time for you to get everything in order? Perfect, I replied, already mentally calculating my next steps. As soon as I left Dave's office, I called my friend Jana, a real estate agent. I need to sell my house as quickly as possible, I said, getting straight to the point. Well, your place is in a great neighborhood, and you've done some amazing renovations. She thought for a moment. If we price it aggressively, we could have offers within a week. But Matthew, are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I said firmly. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Jana worked her magic, and within 5 days, we had 3 competing offers. I accepted the highest one, $285,000, $45,000 more than I had paid for it 4 years ago. Not bad for a small house. Meanwhile, I started researching apartments in Pittsburgh, focusing on areas close to the company's branch. Real estate was more affordable there than in my current city, and I found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in a modern building with a gym and a rooftop terrace for $220,000. I made an offer immediately and started the buying process. Through it all, I told no one in my family what I was doing. My mom called twice, once to thank me for the monthly transfer and another time trying to sound casual as she invited me over for dinner next Saturday. We have some things we'd like to talk to you about, she said, trying to keep her tone light. Sure, Mom, I replied just as casually. I'll be there. I arranged for a moving company to pack up and transport most of my belongings to a storage unit in Pittsburgh, scheduled for the day before the family dinner. I kept only what fit in 2 suitcases, clothes for a couple of weeks, my laptop, and a few personal items. The day after the movers left, I checked into a modest hostel downtown. Sleeping in a twin bed in a shared room felt strange, but it was only temporary. Just 3 more days until my flight to Pittsburgh. On Saturday evening, I drove to my parents' house for the last time. I parked a block away to avoid drawing attention to my packed car. As I walked up the familiar path to the front door, I took a deep breath. This was it, the confrontation I had spent my whole life avoiding. My mom opened the door with a tight smile. Matthew, good, you're here. We were just about to serve dinner. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. My dad sat at the head of the table, looking uncomfortable. Ryan and Olivia were there too, both trying to appear friendly, but coming off as smug. The kids were nowhere to be seen. We exchanged a few meaningless pleasantries before my mom finally set her fork down and got to the point. Matthew, honey, we want to talk to you about your house. What about it? I asked innocently. Well, Mom continued, slipping into that persuasive tone she had used my entire life whenever she wanted me to sacrifice something for Ryan. Your father and I have been thinking it would make sense for Ryan and his family to stay with you for a little while, just until they get back on their feet. I looked at Ryan, who kept his eyes fixed on his plate. Olivia was watching me, a hint of defiance in her gaze. How long? I asked, already knowing the answer. Ryan shrugged. Not sure yet, but things are starting to look up with the investment. Eric says we're on the verge of a major breakthrough any day now. I had to suppress a laugh. 3 months later, and he was still clinging to that fantasy. I don't think it's a good idea, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. My house is pretty small. There are only 2 bedrooms. You could take the smaller bedroom and let them have the master, Mom suggested quickly. Or maybe you could stay with a friend for a bit, just until things settle down. I opened my mouth to argue but stopped myself. What was the point? In a few days, I'd be gone, and none of this would matter anymore. Better to let them think they had one. I let out a heavy sigh, letting my shoulders slump in what I hoped looked like defeat. Fine, I said flatly. When are they planning to move in? My mom looked surprised, clearly expecting more resistance. We were thinking next weekend. Would that work? Sure, I said, pushing my food around on my plate disinterestedly. I guess I'll start packing up some of my things. Ryan and Olivia exchanged triumphant glances. Mom looked relieved. Dad still wouldn't meet my eyes. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. Mom, Dad, Ryan, and Olivia started discussing logistics. What furniture would stay, what would go into storage, how my home office could be turned into a playroom for the kids. I mostly just moved my food around on my plate, responding with one-word answers when directly addressed. After dessert, I stood up. I should get going. Lots to do if I'm moving out next weekend. As I walked to the door, I heard them continue their conversation, their voices lowering but still audible. I told you she'd agree, Mom was saying. Matthew's always been reasonable. Should we help her pack her things? Dad asked. No need, Olivia replied casually. Most of it can just stay in the garage. It's not like she had anything valuable. We'll need a new couch, Ryan added. That old thing kills my back. I quietly closed the front door behind me, their voices fading as I walked away. They had already erased me from the picture, already planning how to take over my space, replace my things with theirs, as if I had never been there at all. But what they didn't know was that there was nothing left for them to take. Back at the hostel, I checked my phone and saw a message from my mom. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. Your brother is so grateful." I didn't reply. Instead, I sent a quick message to Jana to confirm that everything was on track. "Everything's still good." She responded immediately. "All set. The new owners get the keys on Thursday." The next morning, I woke up early, checked out of the hostel, and headed to the airport. As the plane took off, carrying me to my new life in Pittsburgh, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. My new apartment would be ready in 2 days. My new job started in a week. After buying the apartment, I still had about $65,000 left from the house sale, money I planned to invest wisely. Unlike some people I knew, my first week in Pittsburgh passed in a pleasant blur. I settled into my new apartment, a sleek one-bedroom unit with floor-to-ceiling windows and a stunning view of the city skyline. The neighborhood was lively, full of small cafes and boutiques. My new job came with a private office and a 15% salary increase. Everything was going exactly as planned. Until Thursday night, exactly 1 week after I'd left town. I was unpacking the last of my kitchen boxes when my phone blew up with notifications. 27 missed calls in just 2 hours. 15 from my mom, 8 from my dad, and 4 from Ryan, plus dozens of frantic text messages, each more desperate than the last. I knew exactly what had happened. Today was the day Ryan and his family were supposed to move into my house. I could picture it perfectly. Ryan pulling up in a rented moving truck, packed full of their belongings, knocking on the door, and finding strangers living there. I poured myself a glass of wine and sank into my new couch, debating whether to respond or just block their numbers. Before I could decide, my phone rang again. "Mom." Against my better judgment, I answered. "Matthew Edward Johnson." My mother's voice was so loud, I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "What have you done?" "Hello to you too, Mom," I said calmly, taking a sip of wine. "Don't you dare act innocent." She was practically shrieking. "Ryan just showed up at your house with a moving truck, and there's another family living there. They said they bought the house 2 weeks ago." "That's correct," I confirmed. "The Andersons. Lovely couple. 2 teenage kids. They got a great deal." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then she finally spoke. "So you sold your house without telling anyone?" Her voice was shaking with anger. "How could you do something so deceitful?" I nearly choked on my wine. "Deceitful?" I let out a dry laugh. "That's rich coming from the person who was planning to kick me out of my own house without even asking." Another silence. Then, in a much quieter, colder voice, she asked, "Where are you, Matthew?" "Pittsburgh. I got a promotion. Senior accountant at the branch office here." "Pittsburgh." Her voice cracked. "So you just left? Without saying goodbye? Without telling anyone? Kind of like how you were planning to kick me out of my own house without asking first?" I shot back. "That's different." She insisted. "We're family. We needed your help." "No, Mom." I had finally had enough. Ryan and Olivia needed a bailout for their bad decisions. And instead of holding them accountable, you decided that, once again, I should be the one to sacrifice. Like always. That's not fair, isn't it? My voice was sharp now. My entire life, it's been Ryan first, Matthew second. When we needed new school clothes, Ryan got the expensive ones. When we both had events, you went to his. When Grandpa died, Ryan got the nice house because you convinced Grandpa that he deserved it more. And now, when Ryan completely screws up, when he and Olivia throw away everything on the worst financial decision imaginable, your solution is to take away the one thing I worked for? My house. Silence. For a moment, I thought she had hung up. Then, in a voice colder than I had ever heard from her, she said, "I don't know who you think you're talking to, young man, but I'm still your mother." She paused. "And as of this moment, I no longer consider you my son." I had prepared myself for anger, for guilt trips, for manipulation. But this hurt more than I expected. "I think we both know that's always been the case, Mom," I said quietly. "Oh, and I'm canceling the monthly transfers. The $600 I've been sending for Ryan's family. That's done." She went silent again, and I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. Her anger at me versus her need for my money. "We don't want your money," she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Good, because you're not getting it anymore. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up before she could respond and block her number. Then I blocked my dad, Ryan, and Olivia for good. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed with texts from unfamiliar numbers. Ryan using my dad's phone, my mom messaging from friends. I turned my phone off completely and finished my glass of wine in peaceful silence. The next day, I bought a new phone with a new number. I shared only with my closest friends, my new colleagues, and a few extended family members I still trusted, like my Aunt Patty, who sent me a congratulatory bouquet when I told her what I had done. 6 months passed. I thrive in my new position. I made new friends. I dated a bit. Nothing serious. Most importantly, I lived life on my own terms, without the weight of my family's expectations hanging over me. Occasionally, I thought about them. I wondered if Ryan and his family were still living with my parents, if the investment had ever paid off. I doubted it. If my mom and dad were still covering their expenses. If they ever reflected on how they had treated me. If they ever regretted it. But most of the time, I simply didn't think about them at all. One Sunday morning, as I was enjoying my coffee on the balcony, my phone rang. An unknown number, but with my hometown's area code. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello? Hey, Matthew. It was my cousin Beth. I hope you don't mind. I got your number from Aunt Patty. I thought you should know what's going on back here. A knot formed in my stomach. What is it? Ryan and his family are still living with your parents. She hesitated. They're having major financial problems. The investment was a complete scam. Eric disappeared with everyone's money months ago. Can't say I'm surprised, I murmured. Yeah, well, she sighed. Your parents are struggling too. They're behind on bills because they've been supporting 4 extra people. Your dad had to come out of retirement and take a part-time job at a hardware store. I said nothing. I waited for the guilt trip, the plea for me to send money again. But Beth surprised me. I'm not telling you this because I think you should help, she said quickly. Actually, the opposite. Everyone in the family is saying you were the smart one for getting out when you did. She paused. Even your mom admitted to my mom that they never should have tried to take your house. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony for a long time, watching the city below. I felt no satisfaction in my family's struggles, but no guilt either. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself, and I would never go back to being second best again. The phone sat in my hand for a few moments after the call ended. Even though I knew I had made the right choice, there was still something surreal about knowing that my mother had, at least privately, admitted they had been wrong. In a way, I had always known this moment would come. To them, I had always been the backup plan, the reliable one, the person who could be pushed aside because in the end I would always give in. But this time I didn't. I took a deep breath and went back inside my apartment. My life was moving forward. My job was going well, my finances were stable, and for the first time in my life, I was living for myself. The months passed. News about my family became more and more scarce. After Beth's call, I made no effort to keep up with them. If someone mentioned my parents or Ryan, I changed the subject. They weren't my concern anymore. But life has a funny way of bringing the past back, even when you think you've left it behind. Almost a year after my move, I saw them again. I had just returned from a business trip when I decided to take a short detour to my hometown. Not because I missed it, not even close, but because there was something I needed to see with my own eyes. My old house. I drove into the neighborhood, feeling a strange mix of nostalgia and relief. But when I turned the corner and parked a short distance away, I barely recognized the place. The new owners had changed everything. They had repainted the exterior, redone the landscaping, and added their own touches. They had made it their home, and I felt absolutely nothing. It was like looking at a closed chapter of my life, one that no longer held any meaning. But before I could leave, I saw someone crossing the street in the distance. My mother. She looked tired. The woman who once cared so much about appearances now had unkempt hair and simple, worn-out clothes. She didn't see me. I watched as she made her way toward a house, my parents' house. The same house where 5 people now lived. I glanced at the property. The paint was peeling, the yard was overgrown, the porch was cluttered with broken furniture. They were still there, which could only mean one thing. Ryan had never gotten back on his feet, and if he was still there, it meant my parents were still supporting him. Curiosity got the best of me. I needed to see just how bad things had gotten. I parked near a small grocery store in the neighborhood and walked inside. I grabbed a bottle of water and headed to the register. That's when I saw him. My father. He was behind the counter, working. Beth had been right. He had come out of retirement to keep supporting Ryan and his family. He didn't see me, and I made no effort to be noticed. I paid for my water and left. But one thing was clear. They were paying the price for their choices. Ryan never found another real job. After losing all his money in Eric's scam, he had tried a few small businesses, but none of them worked out. He and Olivia were still unemployed, still relying on my parents for everything. And worst of all, they never even tried to fix their own mess. It was easier to stay where they were. After all, they had always had someone to bail them out. Except now, without my financial help, the entire burden had fallen on my father. My mother, who once lived for status and appearances, no longer had the luxury of pretending. Her days were now spent scrambling to pay overdue bills, negotiating debt, and stretching every last dollar. My father, exhausted, spent his days bagging groceries at a small store, struggling just to keep the lights on. And Ryan, the brilliant son, the one who deserved more, was still doing absolutely nothing. He was living exactly the way my mother had planned for me. Dependent. Stuck. The only difference was that I chose to leave. I didn't feel sorry for them. I didn't wonder how they were doing or whether they would ever fix their lives. Because it wasn't my problem anymore. I left town without speaking to anyone and returned to my life. A life I had built on my own. It's been 3 years since I left. I haven't spoken to any of them since. Through Beth, I know that my mother and father never recovered financially. The debt kept piling up, and the house they live in is now practically falling apart. My father, too sick to keep working, was forced to quit. And my mother, desperate, had to admit that she had made a mistake putting Ryan first all these years. But the most ironic part? Ryan and Olivia are still there. They are leeches, living in my parents' house, waiting for a miracle to fix their lives. Meanwhile, I continue building my best life. My job has opened doors to new opportunities. My social circle has expanded. And most importantly, I have never again been second place in my own life. They made their choices, and I made mine. And the best decision I ever made was cutting ties with people who never saw me as a priority. Because in the end, the only person who can guarantee your success is yourself.